Alrighty guys, so this is my next video in Module 2A, which provides a review and supplement for Chapter 5 of your text, which talks about short-term and working memory. So I'm going to continue our discussion of the Baddeley and Hitch 1974 working memory model that we were just talking about in my last video. And in this particular video, I'm going to focus on experimental evidence that seems to uniquely support Baddeley and Hitch's mechanism of the phonological loop, right? So like I said, there are a number of phenomena or experimental scientific findings that illustrate how the phonological loop manages auditory or verbal or linguistic information in working memory. So I'm going to review just a couple of experiments that seems to support Baddeley's model of the phonological loop, right? So remember, the phonological loop is very similar to short-term memory in many respects. The phonological loop is comprised of the phonological store, which is a limited capacity system that holds and processes, holds and processes, that just sounded weird, processes verbal and auditory information. And we also have the articulatory rehearsal mechanism, which allows for maintenance rehearsal, which prevents that auditory and verbal information from being forgotten. Okay. So our first experimental phenomenon that seems to support the notion of the phonological loop is what's called the phonological similarity effect, right? So they found in this particular study that participants tend to make more errors when attempting to recall items that sound alike, like C and T, rather than when recalling items that don't sound alike, like C and X. And this occurs because even when information is presented visually, okay, that visual information involves language, right? Because we're dealing with language. And so it's transmitted into verbal code or linguistic code by the articulatory rehearsal mechanism, right? So the phonological similarity effect, in a nutshell, is just the idea that there is confusion of letters or words that sound similar. So you might remember Conrad's experiment in which he showed that in a memory test, people often confuse similar sounding letters such as F and S, okay? And this result is interpreted as support of the idea that information is coded auditorially in short-term memory, right? So in working memory terminology, Conrad's result seems to support the notion of the phonological loop, right? Which occurs when words are processed in the phonological store, part of the phonological loop, right? Memory suffers for similar items because they are confused with each other, right? So because everything in the phonological store is processed for sound or auditory information, so it's literally spoken to yourself, right? Because you can hear it in your mind's ear, so to speak. Information that sounds similar is going to be more confusable and thus more prone to memory errors than information that sounds different. Okay. So our second demonstration is something known as the word length effect. So Baddeley, Thomson, and Buchanan found that recall was always better for shorter words than longer words, right? And why is this? Well, it's because verbal rehearsal for longer items takes longer in real life, okay, than verbal rehearsal for short items, right? So because short items or short words can be rehearsed rapidly, okay, more short words are going to be maintained in your working memory, right? So remember, so with both short-term memory and working memory models, the way that you maintain information in short-term memory is by saying it to yourself, right? Maintenance rehearsal. And you're saying it to yourself literally in real time, right? So shorter words or words with fewer syllables, right, are going to take less time to speak to yourself, and therefore you're going to be able to rehearse them more times than longer words, which take longer to say and therefore can't be rehearsed as much, right? So more rehearsal equals better memory, and shorter words literally don't take as much time to say, so they can be rehearsed more than longer words with more syllables, right? So related evidence to the word length effect is the result that speaking rate is correlated with working memory span or working memory capacity. So individuals who tend to have a faster speaking rate, right? We all differ in the speed with which we talk. So individuals who just by chance are faster talkers than others actually show a larger working memory capacity for verbal information than people who speak slower. And again, the idea is the same, as if you're a fast talker, when you're actually speaking to people, you should also be someone who can rehearse items very rapidly, right? And if you can rehearse items more rapidly, then that information, whatever you're rehearsing, is going to profit from more rehearsals in real time, right? So the more you rehearse something, the better your memory for that information is going to be. Okay? Similarly, they've found that your capacity for verbal information in working memory is dependent upon the language you speak. Okay, so for example, Chinese has a much faster speaking rate than Arabic or Welsh, right? And it turns out that Chinese speakers have a higher verbal working memory capacity than those who speak Arabic or Welsh. Again, because if your native language enables you to speak faster, you're able to have more rehearsals of information in real time, which means your memory for that information is going to be better. Okay, so my last demonstration of evidence, scientific evidence that seems to uniquely support Baddeley and Hitch's notion of the phonological loop, is what's called the articulatory rehearsal, the articulatory suppression effect. So if you have participants repeat a word or phrase out loud while they learn a list, this is going to substantially reduce their subsequent recall for those items, right? And it should be kind of obvious as to why this is the case, in that repeating the irrelevant word aloud, okay, is going to prevent that critical maintenance rehearsal process, right? If you're saying the word the or la or whatever the word might be, you're not going to be able to simultaneously mentally rehearse the items or say them to yourself because you're already engaging in a verbal response. And so therefore, you're not going to be able to rehearse those items. And if you're not able to engage in that maintenance rehearsal process, okay, that information is going to be rapidly forgotten, right? So when we force people to say the over and over again, it doesn't matter if they're short words or long words, there's no difference. Your memory performance for those items is going to be equally bad, right? And if some of these experimental demonstrations look familiar to you, that's good, because I had you guys do many of these same experimental tasks when you completed your lab for this week, your lab assignment. Okay. All right. So in my next, my last two videos for this module, I'm going to be talking about the visual spatial sketchpad and the central executive and the various kinds of scientific evidence we have to support those mechanisms. Okay. So I'll see you in my next video.